Hello, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Wednesday, February 11th, 2026.
It is good to be here.
The coffee is definitely brewing this morning. The screens are glowing, and we have a stack of research today that is, well, honestly, it's a little intimidating.
I think intimidating is probably the right word. We aren't just looking at, a simple trend report today.
No.
We are looking at a document titled Netizen, Emerging Trends Shaping 2026. And it reads less like a forecast and more like, I don't know, an instruction manual for a new planet.
Right. That's a great way to put it. Usually when we do these dives, we get reports that say things like Gen Z is buying more vintage denim or people are really into pickleball. This is not that. This document claims that the world isn't just changing, but that it is being rewired in real time. That's a very aggressive phrase.
It is. And the author is essentially arguing that we're past the point of change. We're into the era of a structural overhaul. They use this central metaphor throughout the text, the planetary machine.
Let's start there, the planetary machine. Because when I first read that, I pictured, gears and steam, something out of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
But that's not what they mean, is it?
No, not steam. Think of the global economy, our social structures, everything as this massive interlocking engine. For the last 20 years or so, the gears have been kind of slipping. They weren't quite meshing.
A lot of friction, not a lot of movement.
Exactly. But the thesis here is that in 2026, the gears have finally caught. They are grinding against each other with immense force to build a new architecture. And there are two main gears, two massive forces driving this entire machine.
Okay, lay them out for us. What are the gears?
Gear one is technological acceleration. This is the fun stuff, the stuff we always talk about. Robotics, AI, biotech. The speed here is just exponential. It's a curve that's going almost vertical.
Okay, that's familiar territory.
But Gear 2 is what makes this year, 2026, so different. Gear 2 is what the author calls demographic gravity.
Gravity. That's a heavy word.
It's meant to be. We're talking about population collapse in developed nations, aging societies, shrinking workforce. The central argument of this entire manifesto is that you absolutely cannot understand 2026 by looking at robots alone.
Right.
Or by looking at birth rates alone. You have to see how the demographic vacuum is literally sucking the technology into the world to fill the void.
That's the hook that got me.
Yeah.
That connection, it's not just that we can build humanoid robots. It's that we suddenly must build them because we're running out of people to do the work. The why has become urgent.
Precisely. It's an economic architecture being built under extreme, almost unbearable pressure.
So we have a massive roadmap in front of us today. We are going to try and cover the entire wiring diagram of this new machine. We're going to talk about humanoid robots, not as science fiction, but as labor infrastructure. We're going to look at the new energy backbone, the financial markets that literally never sleep, and why the concept of aging is suddenly being treated less like a fact of life and more like an engineering ticket. A problem to be solved.
It's a lot, but it all connects. Every gear pushes the next one.
It does. So let's jump into the first part of this, the physical rewiring. Section 1, humanoid robotics.
Let's do it.
I want to start with a bit of a confession. For the last few years, whenever I saw a video of a robot, one of those viral clips, it was usually dancing to 80s music or doing a backflip.
Right.
And it always felt like a circus act. The source here calls it engineering theater.
And that's exactly what it was. It was viral marketing. It was meant to impress you, to get clicks, not to actually do a job.
But this source says that era is dead, completely over.
Yeah.
In 2026, the shift is from spectacle to utility. And the number that just jumped off the page at me was the funding. Global funding for humanoid robotics hit $4.6 billion in 2025.
That is the signal. That's the tell. Venture capitalists and, more importantly, institutional investors, they do not put nearly $5 billion into a dancing bear. They put that kind of money into infrastructure. And that is the key word the source uses over and over. Labor infrastructure. This is being viewed now like we view railroads or fiber optic cables. It's a fundamental economic layer.
So who are the big players actually deploying this? Let's get specific. We've all been hearing about Tesla's Optimus for a while.
Right. And in previous years, Optimus was a prototype. It was a guy in a suit, then it was a shaky robot on a stage. But the 2026 update here is that it's moving toward commercial factory deployments. It's leaving the lab, and it is entering the production line.
So doing actual work.
Doing actual, boring, repetitive work in Tesla's own factories first. Then you have Boston Dynamics Atlas,
which has always been the most impressive mover. The parkour, the balance, it's almost uncanny.
Physically, yes. Their hydraulics and their balance algorithms are unmatched. They are the gold standard. But the big update here, the game changer, is the brain. The source mentions Atlas is now being enhanced with Google's Gemini AI models.
Okay, let's pause on that. Because Boston Dynamics was always about the body, the hardware.
Yeah.
Google, Alphabet, they're all about the brain, the software. What happens when you mash those two things together?
You get fluid motion combined with task awareness. It's a huge leap. See, an old robot could do a backflip because it was programmed with that exact sequence of movements. It didn't know why it was doing a backflip.
It couldn't improvise.
It couldn't improvise at all. And it couldn't spot a dirty sock on the floor and know that it needed to go in the hamper. When you plug a multimodal model like Gemini, which understands language and images and context, into a body as capable as Atlas, the robot understands the room it's in. It's not just moving, it's behaving. It can make decisions.
And we can't ignore the international competition here. The source makes a big point of highlighting XPeng from China and their iron platform.
And the distinction there is critical. The key phrase for XPeng is industrial mass production.
They're not building the Ferrari of robots.
Exactly. XPeng isn't trying to build a boutique, high-performance, backflipping robot. They're trying to build the Toyota Corolla of robots. Cheap, reliable, and absolutely everywhere. Their goal is scale above all else.
Speaking of everywhere, the CES 2026 recap in this report mentions robots doing parkour, which is cool, I guess, but also folding laundry. And I have to say, as a consumer, the laundry robot excites me way more than the parkour robot.
As it should. But here is the thing about that laundry video, and the source makes a really, really important point about this. Viral videos don't matter anymore.
What do you mean?
The new benchmark for 2026, the only metric that investors and factory managers care about is reliability.
Meaning what, exactly? Can you break that down?
Meaning, can it do the laundry 10,000 times in a row without ripping a single shirt? In a lab, if a robot succeeds once, you post the video and you get 1 million views. In a factory, if it fails once, you shut down the entire production line and you lose $1 million. So the shift this year is boring. It's about metrics like mean time between failures. How many thousands of hours can this thing run before a technician has to touch it? That's the conversation in 2026.
The source actually breaks down the specific criteria for industrial adoption. And I think this is crucial because it explains why we haven't seen these things everywhere yet. The first criteria is cycle time parity.
Right. But simply, it has to be as fast as a person. If a human can grab a part off a conveyor and screw it into a chassis in 10 seconds, the robot cannot take 12 seconds.
Because that would slow down the whole line.
It destroys the economics of the factory. It has to be at least as fast, if not faster, than the meat bag it's replacing.
The meat bag. That's a good one.
Well, you know what I mean, from a purely operational perspective.
The second criteria they list is maintenance intervals.
Yeah, and this is a big one. It can't break down every shift. The old industrial robots, the big arms, they run for years. A humanoid robot needs to be able to run for weeks, maybe months, without needing a technician to come and reboot it or fix a joint.
And the third, which is the big one, the one that unlocks everything, total cost of ownership must be below human equivalent labor.
And that is the tipping point we are dancing right on the edge of in 2026. It's the whole ballgame. Once the robot costs, say, $15 an hour to operate, and that includes the electricity, the repairs, and the initial purchase price amortized over 5 years.
And the human worker it's replacing costs $25 an hour with benefits.
The floodgates open. It becomes economically irrational not to use the robot for that specific task. The spreadsheet makes the decision for you.
So where does this happen first? The source has a great term for this. It calls it the gateway drug for humanoid robotics.
Logistics and warehousing.
Why there? Why not a car factory or a hospital or a construction site?
Because a warehouse is the perfect middle ground. It's a Goldilocks environment. It's not as chaotic and unpredictable as a hospital hallway where you might run into a gurney or a crying child at any moment. But it's also not as rigidly structured as a traditional car assembly line where everything is bolted down and moves in a perfectly predictable way.
Yeah.
In a warehouse, you have shelves, you have aisles, you have boxes of all different sizes and weights. You need legs to walk down that aisle, and you need hands to grab a weirdly shaped package. It's the perfect challenge.
The timeline here is pretty aggressive. It suggests that between 2026 and 2028, we're in a phase of aggressive pilot programs.
Which means we'll see them working next to people, but probably behind safety cages or in specific cordoned-off zones of the warehouse. Testing, learning, collecting data.
And by 2032, what's the prediction?
Full-scale deployment. That's the point where you might walk into a major Amazon or FedEx hub and it's mostly machines. The humans are there as supervisors, technicians, the mission control for the robot workforce.
Okay, I have to challenge something here because it's always bothered me. I'm looking at this section, the inversion of design logic, and my question is, why legs? Wheels seem so much more efficient. They don't trip, they use less battery. Why are we so obsessed with making robots look like us? Is it just some kind of engineering vanity?
That is the billion-dollar question. And the source argues pretty convincingly, I think, that it's not vanity, it's legacy. It's about the world we've already built. Think about a factory, or an office, or your house.
Okay.
Every door handle is at a certain height for a human hand. Every stair has a certain rise and run for a human foot. The width of every aisle is designed for human shoulders to pass through.
So the entire built world is based on the human form factor.
Exactly. For the last 10,000 years, we've built the world for us. If you want to use a wheeled robot in that world, you often have to rebuild the facility. You have to install ramps. You have to widen aisles. You have to move shelves. That's incredibly expensive. It's a huge capital expenditure.
Right.
This inversion of design logic means that instead of rebuilding the factory to fit the machine, we are building the machine to fit the factory.
Because of the factory, the expensive part stays the same. You just swap out the labor layer.
Exactly. It's a drop-in replacement. If you have a humanoid robot, you can take a human worker off the line on Friday, put the robot in that same spot on Monday, and you don't have to change a single screwdriver, a single shelf, or a single staircase. That capital efficiency is why legs ultimately win, even if wheels are technically better at just moving on a flat surface.
That makes a lot of sense. It's actually cheaper to build a ridiculously complex robot with legs than it is to rebuild the entire world.
That's the bet everyone is making.
Okay, so we've got machines walking around our warehouses. Now let's talk about machines moving us around on our streets. Section 2. Mobility as an electro-industrial stack.
This is the second layer of this physical rewiring. And there's a nice distinction here in the source between the robots we just talked about and autonomous cars. The source calls humanoid robots embodied AI intelligence in a body. And it calls autonomous vehicles embedded AI.
Meaning the intelligence is embedded into the vehicle itself, into the environment.
Right. You don't talk to the car like a person. The car is the intelligent environment.
So let's do a status check. It's
Yeah.
February 2026. Where are we really with this? Because I feel like I've been promised a car that will let me sleep during my commute for about a decade now.
We all have. And we definitely went through the trough of disillusionment. But the argument here is that we're past that. We are now in the scaling phase. And you can see it in the data points. Waymo isn't just a science project in Phoenix anymore.
Right.
They are operating in 20-plus cities. That's a real commercial footprint.
And Tesla is ramping up the Cybercab production. Zoox has paid commercial services active in multiple cities.
And that's the key word, paid. People are paying real money for these rides. It's no longer a beta test where you sign a 10-page waiver and hope for the best. It's a business.
Now, under the hood, I want to talk about the tech stack. The source mentions NVIDIA's Alpamayo AI stack. I have to admit, I've never heard of this.
Yeah.
What is it?
So NVIDIA is basically the engine room for this entire revolution, for AI in general. The Alpamayo stack is their latest, most powerful generation of hardware and software specifically architected for vision-based perception in autonomous systems.
And why does that specific phrase, vision-based, matter so much?
Because of cost. For a long time, the dominant approach to self-driving cars relied heavily on LiDAR. You know those spinning buckets you'd see on the roof of a Waymo or an Uber test vehicle?
Yeah, the spinning lasers.
Those are incredibly effective, but they're also incredibly expensive. We're talking thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars per unit. You simply cannot build a mass-market robotaxi, a car for the people, if it has a piece of equipment on the roof that costs more than the rest of the car combined.
So the goal is to drive using just cameras.
To drive primarily using cameras, which cost $5 each. The Alpamayo stack is the sheer brute force of computing power that allows the car to take that 2D camera feed and infer depth, speed, and risk with the same or even better accuracy than a human eye does. It basically recreates 3D space from 2D images.
So it kills the need for the expensive lasers.
It dramatically reduces the reliance on them. You might still have one for redundancy, but it's no longer the primary sensor. And that is what finally bends the cost curve down to where it needs to be.
And that cost curve is everything. The inflection point section in this report has some absolutely brutal math. It says robotaxis need a cost per mile below human-driven rides.
It's simple, ruthless economics. If an Uber with a human driver in your city costs $2.50 a mile and a robotaxi costs $2.60, almost nobody uses the robotaxi. It's new, it's a little creepy, why bother?
But if the robotaxi costs $1 a mile,
Everyone uses it. Your behavior changes instantly. It becomes cheaper than owning a car.
yeah.
At that point, the entire model of personal car ownership starts to crumble.
And to get to that dollar a mile figure, utilization has to be ridiculously high.
Above 50%, that's the magic number. Think about your personal car. It sits in your driveway or a parking lot 95% of the time. As an asset, it is terrible.
It's a depreciating money pit.
Exactly. A robotaxi is only profitable if it is constantly moving, either carrying passengers or driving itself to a charging station. It needs to be working more than half the day, every day.
There's also a regulatory update in here that I think flew under the radar for most people. The United Nations Economic Commission for Europe.
This was huge. It happened in mid-2026, and it was a framework that harmonized the approval process for automated driving systems.
Okay, why does a UN commission in Europe matter to someone in, say, Ohio?
Because car companies are global.
Yo.
Ford, Tesla, Mercedes, Toyota, they don't want to build one software stack and one set of hardware for Germany, another for Japan, and a third for the US. That's a nightmare.
Right.
A harmonized framework means they can build one driver, one core AI system, and get it approved for deployment globally with only minor regional tweaks. It lowers the barrier to entry and the cost of scaling up massively. It's the boring bureaucratic stuff that actually unlocks the revolution.
So the cars are smart, the robots are walking, but none of this moves without juice.
Yeah.
Which brings us to Section 3, the energy backbone.
And specifically, the ingredients of that energy, the critical minerals.
The source opens this section with a statement that feels like it belongs in a history book 100 years from now. It says, if oil defined the 20th century, lithium and rare earth elements define the 21st.
It's the fundamental geopolitical reality of our lives now. You can't print lithium. You can't just discover more of it easily. You have to dig it up from very specific places on Earth. And right now, the global race to control those places is creating this incredible tension.
Let's talk about a U.S. initiative called Project Vault. That sounds like a plot from a Marvel movie.
It does, but it's very real. It's a $12 billion U.S. government strategy to create a domestic critical minerals stockpile.
So just like the strategic petroleum reserve we have for oil.
Exactly like that. We have massive underground salt caverns full of crude oil in case of a war or a major supply crisis. Now we are building secure warehouses full of refined lithium, cobalt, nickel, and manganese. Because if the supply chain from Asia gets cut off, for whatever reason, for even 2 weeks, the entire American auto industry, the entire battery manufacturing sector, and a huge chunk of the tech sector grinds to a complete halt. It's a massive national security vulnerability.
And the diplomatic side of this is just as intense. The report mentions 11 new bilateral agreements.
That's diplomatic code for locking down supply from friendly nations. The U.S. is going to countries like Australia, Canada, and even Saudi Arabia, which is getting into mining, and signing these long-term deals that basically say, we will buy everything you can possibly dig up for the next 20 years.
It's a way to bypass China's dominance in the processing of these minerals.
A direct attempt to build a parallel, non-Chinese supply chain, because China has been tightening the screws. The source mentions they briefly intensified their export controls on some rare earths last year.
What was that about?
It was a warning shot. They eased off, but the message to the world was crystal clear. We control the tap, don't forget that.
So we have 3 responses building. 1 is diversification, buying from friends. 2 is domestic revival. The report says over $1 billion is going into U.S. mining and processing. But my favorite part of this section is the 3rd response. Recycling as urban mining.
This is the most elegant solution, I think. It's brilliant. We have millions of tons of high-grade lithium, cobalt, and copper sitting in our junk drawers right now.
In old iPhones, dead laptops.
First-generation EVs sitting in junkyards, so instead of spending billions to dig a massive new hole in Nevada and process tons of raw ore,
You just harvest the city. You mine the landfill.
you mine the landfill. And the thing is, the concentration of these critical minerals in an old iPhone battery is vastly higher than the concentration in raw rock ore. It's much more energy efficient and environmentally friendly to recycle an existing battery than it is to mine, ship, and refine the raw materials from scratch. It's becoming a matter of national defense to properly recycle your electronics.
That's a wild reframe. Recycling isn't just a green thing to do anymore. It's patriotic.
Yes.
It's a strategic imperative.
It is. It's strategic resource recovery.
Now let's look at the batteries themselves, the technology inside. The source has a great heading, Battery Chemistry as Destiny.
And there are two big players on the stage in 2026. First, the one everyone's been waiting for, solid-state batteries.
These are the ones that don't catch fire, right? That's the main selling point.
Well, they are much, much harder to set on fire, yes. They replace the liquid electrolyte, which is flammable, with a solid ceramic or polymer material. But the real benefit, the reason car companies are pouring billions into this, is energy density.
More power in a smaller package.
Exactly. You can get more range into a smaller, lighter package. And they can charge incredibly fast. We're talking 10-minute charging for 300 miles of range. This is the technology that finally kills range anxiety for good.
And the second one is sodium ion. And I have to admit, I'm confused here. Sodium is table salt.
Basically, yes,
Yep.
sodium chloride. And that's precisely why it's such a big deal. Lithium is relatively rare and, as we just discussed, geopolitically complicated. Sodium is everywhere. It's in the ocean. It's dirt cheap.
But it must be worse, right? Otherwise, we'd have used it all along.
It's less energy dense. It's heavier and bulkier for the same amount of storage. You wouldn't put a sodium-ion battery in a high-performance sports car or an iPhone where space and weight are critical.
So what's it for?
Think about the grid. Think about a massive solar farm out in the desert. You need to store that energy for when the sun goes down. You don't care if the battery's heavy. You don't care if it's big. It just sits on a concrete pad for 30 years.
So you use the cheap, heavy stuff for stationary storage, and you save the expensive, lightweight lithium for things that have to move.
Exactly. Sodium ion, championed by companies like CATL in China, is the key to making renewable energy a 247 power source. And it completely reduces the geopolitical risk because nobody can cut off your supply of salt.
The source uses a metaphor here that I really like. It calls energy storage the lung of the renewable economy.
It's a perfect image. Solar and wind are intermittent. They're like taking a breath in, the sun sets, the wind dies, that's breathing out. The grid needs to breathe steadily. The battery allows it to inhale huge amounts of energy when it's sunny and windy, and then exhale it slowly and steadily through the night.
And without that lung.
The renewable economy suffocates. It can't provide reliable power.
And with a projected market size expected to exceed $224 billion by 2035, that's a very, very big lung.
A massive one.
Okay, we've built the robots, we've fueled the cars. Now, how do we pay for all this? Section 4, the financial rewiring.
And this is where the planetary machine starts to run at a speed that humans, a single human brain, can't really comprehend anymore.
The headline here is, Markets Without Closing Bells.
Think about that concept for a second. The closing bell. It's a complete anachronism. It comes from a time when traders physically stood on a floor in New York and yelled at each other, and at 4 o'clock, they needed to go home to sleep and eat.
But algorithms don't sleep. And global news doesn't sleep.
Exactly. In a global, interconnected world, news happens 20/40/47. If a key factory in China explodes at 3 a.m. New York time, why should you have to wait 6.5 hours until the market opens to sell your stock? The risk is already there.
So the New York Stock Exchange is finally experimenting with 2047 trading.
They are, and the technology enabling this, tokenized equities, basically putting stocks on a blockchain, grew nearly 3,000% year over year in 2025. We're talking about $1 billion in value now. It's moving from a niche crypto experiment to the main stage finance.
I want to ask about a technical term in here, atomic settlement. Because that sounds like something from a physics class. What does it actually mean for a trader or for the market?
Okay, so right now, when you buy a stock on your phone, the app tells you the trade is done. It looks instant. But in the deep plumbing of the financial system, it actually takes 1 or sometimes 2 full business days, T+1 or T+2, for the money and the stock certificate to actually swap hands between the big banks.
There's a delay, a lag in the system.
A massive delay. And that delay creates risk. What if the other party goes bankrupt overnight? And to cover that risk, it requires massive amounts of collateral, billions and billions of dollars, to just sit there doing nothing, just in case a trade fails. It's pure friction.
So atomic settlement removes the delay.
It means the trade and the settlement happen in the same indivisible or atomic unit of time. The moment the trade is agreed upon, the stock is in your account and the money is in theirs. Instantly. No delay, no clearinghouse, no counterparty risk.
The source estimates this could save the capital markets over $100 billion over time, just by removing that waiting period.
The efficiency gain is almost hard to calculate. It's a fundamental upgrade to the engine of capitalism.
But it's not just about speed. It's also about enforceable rights. Because early crypto tokens, it were supposed to represent stocks.
They were just play money,
They
right?
were just price proxies. If you bought a stock token in 2021, you were just betting on the price of Apple. You didn't actually own a piece of the company. You couldn't vote at the shareholder meeting. You didn't get dividends. And now, what's changed?
Now, thanks to new regulatory frameworks like the Genius and Clarity Acts that are mentioned here, these tokens are becoming actual legal claims. If you hold the token in your digital wallet, you legally own the share. The dividend gets sent directly to your wallet. You can use the token to vote on board members. It's the critical step of integrating the new tech with the old law.
I see Securitize and Ondo listed as key players here, building on top of blockchains like Ethereum and Solana.
They are the new plumbers of this new system. They're building the pipes.
Let's pivot slightly to another part of this new financial world, prediction markets. The wisdom of crowds. We saw this blow up in popularity around the last election, the Super Bowl, all sorts of events.
Platforms like Kalshi, which is regulated, and Polymarket, which is more of a global crypto platform.
The source says something really provocative here. It says that on certain macro predictions, amateur forecasters on these platforms are occasionally outperforming institutional analysts at major banks. How is that possible? A guy in his basement beating a team at Goldman Sachs.
It comes down to two things, I think: incentives and aggregation. Think about the incentives. If you are a pundit on TV, you get paid to be confident and entertaining. You can be wrong 10 times in a row, and as long as you are charismatic, you keep your job.
There's no penalty for being wrong.
Zero. But in a prediction market, you are betting your own money. If you are wrong, you lose cash. That focuses the mind like nothing else. It strips away the bias, the ego, the need to be entertaining. The market becomes a collective intelligence engine because every single participant has skin in the game and is trying desperately to be right, not just loud.
But what's the dark side? Isn't there a huge vulnerability to insider trading?
That is the big debate. If someone suddenly bets $5 million that a certain CEO is going to get fired tomorrow, do they just have a really good analytical model, or do they know someone on the board of directors? It's a very, very fine line between collective wisdom and a new, hard-to-trace form of insider information.
Okay, so that's the financial layer. Let's move up the stack. Section 5, the intelligence layer. We talked about the body of the machine, the fuel, the money. Now, the brain.
The American AI stack, as the course calls it.
The source calls AI infrastructure. It compares it to electricity, which is a common analogy, but it feels more true in 2026.
That is the shift. In 2023, AI was a tool. It was a fun chatbot you played with. In 2026, it is the current running through the walls. You don't use AI anymore. You live and work inside systems that run on AI. It's becoming invisible, but indispensable.
Let's break down the 5-layer cake analogy from NVIDIA. I thought this was a really clear way to visualize the whole ecosystem.
It's a great way to see how it all fits together. Layer 1, the bottom layer, is the chips, the silicon itself. Layer 2 is the systems, the supercomputers, the servers you put the chips into. Layer 3 is the platforms, the cloud infrastructure like AWS or Azure that hosts it. Layer 4 is the software, the foundation models themselves like GPT or Gemini. And layer 5, the top, is the applications, the actual things we touch and use.
And the American AI stack, as this document defines it, includes a new layer that's emerging, something called agentic orchestration.
This is the buzzword you need to know for 2026, agentic AI.
How is that different from the ChatGPT we've had for a few years? It sounds like marketing speak.
It's a fundamental shift. Think about it as moving from chat to action. Old AI, what we now call generative AI, it creates things. It generates text or images or code. You say, write me a poem about a lonely robot, and it writes a poem.
Okay, it's a content creator.
Exactly. Agentic AI executes tasks. Yes.
Yeah.
It can navigate the web, fill out forms, trigger financial transactions. It can orchestrate a complex workflow across multiple applications. It's the difference between having a brilliant storyteller and having a team of brilliant personal assistants who work for you 24/7.
That sounds incredibly useful, but also, I have to say, a little terrifying.
It is absolutely both. The source uses the term cognitive exoskeleton. Just like a physical exoskeleton lets a factory worker lift 500 pounds, a cognitive exoskeleton lets one person do the work of a 10-person logistics team or a 5-person marketing department. You become the manager. The AI agents are your tireless workers.
But the security implications must be insane. If I give an AI access to my credit card, my email, and tell it to go buy stuff, what happens if it gets hacked?
That is the nightmare scenario, and it's why the report notes that CVE's common vulnerabilities and exposures are rising dramatically. We are connecting these brilliant autonomous agents to legacy banking systems and corporate software that were built in the 1980s. It's a massive security mismatch. If an agent goes rogue or gets hijacked by a malicious actor, it could drain accounts or exfiltrate data in seconds.
There's a fascinating marketing note in here, too. The death of SEO and the rise of AEO, AI-optimized search.
Or answer engine optimization. Yeah, this is a big one. SEO, search engine optimization, was the art and science of getting a human to click your link on a Google search results page.
In AEO,
With AEO, you aren't trying to get a click. You are trying to be the definitive answer that the AI agent finds when it's performing a task for its user. When I tell my AI agent, buy me the best pair of running shoes for a marathon, the AI is going to scan the entire web in a fraction of a second and pick one. As a brand like Nike or Brooks, you no longer need to convince me with a flashy ad. You need to convince the AI with data, with specs, with reviews that your shoe is the correct answer.
that completely changes the entire advertising industry. You're not marketing to people anymore. You're marketing to algorithms.
You are lobbying the machine.
Let's switch gears to something a bit softer, but maybe even more profound. The biology layer. Section 6. Because we aren't just optimizing the software in our computers, we're actively trying to rewrite the code in our own bodies.
Healthcare, drugs, and longevity.
First up is AI in healthcare. And I'm glad to see the source emphasizes that the real focus here is on execution over hype.
Yes. Thank goodness. We don't need an AI to replace a heart surgeon just yet. What we desperately need is an AI to fix the soul-crushing paperwork that is burning out the entire medical profession.
The source has a great line: removing friction from the bloodstream of healthcare.
Think about the last time you went to a doctor. How much of that visit did they spend actually looking at you and talking to you versus typing into a computer?
Mostly typing. My doctor barely makes eye contact.
Exactly. Claims processing, patient intake forms, diagnostic triage, writing up notes. This is the stuff that burns out doctors and nurses. If agentic AI can handle the admin, if it can listen to the conversation in the room and automatically fill out the charts and file the insurance claim in the background, the doctor gets to be a doctor again.
So it's about restoring the human connection in medicine by automating the bureaucracy that killed it.
That's the ideal outcome, yes.
But the big story, the thing the source calls a shockwave, hitting the entire economy, is GLP-1s, the new class of weight loss drugs.
The Ozempic era. But in 2026, it's evolving way beyond that first generation.
We have oral versions now, so it's a daily pill, not just a weekly shot. And the report highlights these next-generation compounds like cagrilintide and retatrutide.
Which are showing 23 to 30% weight reduction in clinical trials. That is approaching, and in some cases exceeding, the weight loss you see from bariatric surgery, but it's achieved with a pill.
The economic ripple effects here are what I find so fascinating. The source mentions the obvious impact on the food industry.
It's huge. It's an earthquake. If 20% of the population in developed countries is suddenly taking a drug that kills their craving for sugar, fat, and alcohol, what happens to PepsiCo? What happens to McDonald's? What happens to Budweiser?
Their entire business model is threatened.
Or they have to pivot fast.
Yeah.
We are already seeing GLP-1 companion foods being marketed. High protein, small portions, nutrient-dense, but think beyond food. Think about airlines.
Airlines, yeah.
If the average passenger weighs 20 pounds less, a company like United Airlines saves hundreds of millions of dollars a year in jet fuel across its entire fleet.
Wow. I never would have thought of that.
It's a second-order effect. And then there's insurance and healthcare costs. If obesity rates plummet, rates of heart disease drop. Type 2 diabetes drops. The number of knee replacements drops. The long-term savings for the entire healthcare system are astronomical, even if the drugs themselves are expensive up front.
Then we have the final frontier of this section, longevity. And the key phrase here is health span over lifespan.
This is a critical distinction. The goal isn't necessarily to make you live to be 150 if you are frail and bedridden for the last 50 of those years. The goal is to extend your health span, the period of your life where you are healthy, active, and vibrant. It's about having you hiking and playing tennis at 95.
And the mindset shift is reframing aging as an optimization problem.
It sounds a little cold and clinical, but it's actually a very hopeful perspective. It treats aging not as some inevitable mystical decay, but as a series of technical glitches in our biology that we can potentially patch and repair.
The report mentions a few approaches, like senolytics.
which is about clearing out what are called senescent cells or zombie cells. These are cells that stop dividing, but they don't die. They just hang around in your tissues and secrete inflammatory signals that damage the cells around them. Senolytic drugs are designed to go in and selectively flush out these zombie cells.
So it's like a deep tissue detox for your entire cellular structure.
Exactly. And this whole longevity mindset is moving beyond the clinic and into the home. It's becoming part of residential design, circadian lighting systems that sync with the sun, advanced air and water purification, homes designed to minimize stress. Your house itself becomes a health device.
Okay, section 7, the human-machine interface. We talked about external robots. We talked about internal biology.
Yeah.
Now we mashed them together. Neuralink.
The ultimate convergence. The final blurring of the line.
So as of early 2026, we are 2 years into the telepathy trials. The source says there were 21 individuals with implants.
And that number 21 might sound small to you, but in the world of chronic, indwelling brain-computer interfaces, that is a massive cohort. It's an unprecedented amount of data.
And what can these individuals actually do with the implant?
Thought-controlled digital interaction, moving a cursor on a screen, typing emails, playing video games, all just by thinking. For people with paralysis, it's a restoration of their ability to interact with the world.
And the voice trial.
This is the really powerful one. This is focused on restoring speech for patients who are paralyzed and unable to speak, like those with severe ALS. Imagine being locked in your own body, completely unable to communicate, and then having a chip that can translate your neural spikes, your intended speech, into a synthesized voice in real time.
That's miraculous.
It really is. But the plan, as is always the case, is to scale. The document talks about plans for automated surgery, using a robot surgeon to implant the threads into the brain with micron-level precision. And they are pushing for the number of electrodes to increase towards 3,000 per implant.
More bandwidth to and from the brain.
Much more bandwidth means much finer control. But it also raises the huge philosophical question that the source flags. We are rapidly crossing the line from therapy, fixing something that is broken in a paralyzed person, to enhancement.
Making a healthy person better, faster, smarter.
Right. If I can get an implant that lets me type 200 words a minute just by thinking or access the internet directly with my mind, do I have an unfair advantage over you in the workplace, in society?
It's the classic cyberpunk future. The rich get cognitive upgrades, and the poor stay purely biological.
That is the ethical battleground of the next decade, and it's no longer science fiction. It's a real policy debate we need to have right now.
Finally, let's look at the pressure cooker that all this is happening in, Section 8, because all of this incredible tech is happening against a backdrop of some very difficult social and economic numbers.
This is the demographic gravity we mentioned at the very start, the second big gear of the machine.
Population collapse. The data for the U.S. is stark. Population growth slowed to just 0.5% in 2025, and immigration, which propped it up, dropped sharply.
And look at the tipping point mentioned in the report. In the U.S., births are projected to exceed deaths only until about 2030. After that point, the only reason the U.S. population grows at all is immigration. If you were to completely close the border, the country would begin to shrink.
And the economic cost of that shrinkage is just massive.
It's a drag of over $100 billion a year on GDP. Less consumption, fewer workers paying taxes, a smaller innovation base. It's a slow, grinding crisis.
And this brings us full circle, right back to the robots we started with.
Exactly. Why are we rushing to build Optimus? Why are we pouring billions into agentic AI? Because we are looking at the demographic spreadsheets and realizing we are running out of humans, especially for the jobs people don't want to do.
So it's not a choice between a human worker and a robot worker. Soon, the choice will be between a robot worker and no worker at all.
It's a race. Can we automate the economy faster than the population contracts? That's the tightrope we're walking.
Then there's housing. The section is called Policy Meets Capital.
The shortage remains acute. We all feel it. And the government is responding with legislation like the Housing for the 21st Century Act, pushing grants and tax credits. But the real conflict described here is interesting. Institutional investors, big capital, are trying to solve this with technology, specifically modular housing.
Factory-built homes.
Exactly, houses built like cars. On an assembly line, indoors, protected from the weather, then trucked to the site and assembled in days. It's more efficient, it's higher quality, it's cheaper.
But people hate it. Communities fight it tooth and nail.
NIMBYism. Not in my backyard. The source has a brilliant line. It calls housing economics trapped in politics. You can solve the engineering problem of building a cheap, high-quality house, But you can't easily solve the political problem of a local town council that doesn't want those kinds of houses or those kinds of people in their neighborhood. Zoning laws are the real barrier.
And finally, California, a case study they call the fiscal crossroads.
California is the perfect microcosm of this entire 2026 dynamic. It has the highest innovation in the world, Silicon Valley, AI, Hollywood, biotech, but it also has extreme volatility.
A massive $248 billion budget, but they're facing potential deficits of $18 billion or more.
Because their tax revenue is dangerously reliant on capital gains from the stock market. When the tech sector booms, California is flush with cash. When the tech sector has a slight hiccup, California is suddenly broke. It shows the incredible danger of building a state economy on the back of this volatile, high-speed planetary machine.
It's a wild ride. And we've covered, wow, everything from laundry robots to lithium mines to brain chips. Let's try to pull this all together in the outro. What is the meta theme of 2026?
The source calls it convergence under pressure. Everything is happening at once, and each force is amplifying the others.
Let's synthesize the three big converging forces we talked about. Force one, automation versus demographics.
Robots are rising precisely because the number of working-age people is falling. One is the answer to the other.
Force two, sovereignty versus globalization.
We want the benefits of global technology, like AI models trained on the world's data. But we want to own the mines and the supply chains and the chip factories domestically. We want the world, but we want to be safe from it. It's a deep contradiction.
And force three, biology versus technology.
The line is just gone. Whether it's Neuralink in the brain or a GLP-1 drug re-engineering your metabolism, we are actively integrating the machine into the human biological experience. We are becoming the system.
The final verdict in this manifesto is so clear. It says, the future is neither dystopian nor utopian. It is structural.
I love that line. It strips away all the emotion and the fear and the hype. It says, stop asking if this future is good or bad. That's the wrong question. Instead, just look at the structure. We are fundamentally redesigning the economic metabolism of the planet, how we generate energy, how we move, how we work, how we trade, how we age.
And the closing thought, the one that really stuck with me, 2026 is not the destination. It is the year the scaffolding became visible.
That's the image to leave everyone with. For the last 20 years, we felt like we were building this new world in the dark. We felt things changing, but we couldn't see the overall shape. Now, in 2026, the lights are on. We can see the steel beams, we can see the robots, the batteries, the AI agents, the demographic charts. We can finally see the structure of the next century being built around us in real time.
Which leads us to the final, provocative question for you, the listener. In a world where most physical labor is done by robots, where financial markets never close, where your personal assistant is a tireless AI, and where aging is treated as an optional engineering problem, what is the unique, irreplaceable role left for you?
That is the only question that really matters now.
I'm definitely going to need another coffee to think about that one. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us.
See you next time.